Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov. We are continuing the Rambam's laws of war. So if you have the PDF that's attached to the Zoom invitation, we are in the 4th chapter. The 5th chapter, Mechila. So we're in the book of Shoftim of the Rambam. If you have a Rambam, you want to go to Shoftim. Hilchot Melachim u'Milchamot, chapter 5. We spent the entire time last time speaking about Amalek and the 7 nations and wiping out the memory of Amalek. Tonight, we're going to speak about part of the laws of war, which has to do with the mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. So it's interesting that this halakha comes out here, but it's relevant because when we say Eretz Yisrael, what do we refer to when we say Eretz Yisrael? When we say Eretz Yisrael, do we mean Eretz Yisrael that was promised us in the Torah? What if the king of Israel conquers more land? What is the status of that land in Eretz Yisrael? So we have to understand when we say war, conquering land, Eretz Yisrael, what is the relationship between those terms? We're going to do them right now. The Rambam tells us the following. Kol haratzot, all of the lands, shekovshim Yisrael b'melech al pi bedin, that the Jewish people conquer with their king through the bedin. Harei ze kibush rabim. This is considered a conquering of the masses. V'harei hi ke'eretz Yisrael shekavash Yehoshua. And it has the status of the land of Israel that Yehoshua conquered. L'chol davar, in every way. V'hu sheichbeshu ota achar kibush kol Eretz Yisrael ha'amura b'Torah, and that's assuming that you conquer it after you've conquered the parts of Eretz Yisrael that are written in the Torah. So let me explain to you how this works. You have Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael that was promised to us in the Torah. Now the king wants to go conquer more land, correct? We said that's called a milchemet reshut. Very good. Why? Because he has to ask permission from the Sanhedrin. So here you have a king who asks permission from the Sanhedrin. Then he goes to war and conquers land in Eretz Yisrael. What is the status, the halachic status of this land? It's Eretz Yisrael, l'chol davar, in every which way. So that doesn't matter if it's a king or a shofet, one of the judges, if it's or a prophet, as long as he does it with the permission of the bedin and in the accordance of the wishes of the majority of the Jewish people, this is called kibush rabim. If you want to look up this term, kibush rabim, let me see if I can quickly pull up for you a working definition. Yes, and terumot. So Rabbenu Rambam tells us Yeah, you see that? Very good. So the Rambam says in the 1st chapter of Hilchot Terumot, Eretz Yisrael. Do you have the Rambam in front of you? What are you reading from? Google, okay? Eretz Yisrael ha'amura b'chol makom. When we say Eretz Yisrael, anywhere, hi haratzot shekovesh otan melech Yisrael, o shofet, o navi, midat rov Yisrael. It's something, a piece of land that the king or the judge or the prophet conquers, meaning the majority of the Jewish people go with him to conquer this land. V'zehu hanikra kibush rabim, and this is called the conquering of the masses. Aval yechid miYisrael, but if there's an individual Jew, or mishpacha, or shevet, or a family, or a tribe, shehalchu v'kavshu la'atzman makom, and they go and conquer land, afilu min haaretz shenitana leAvraham, even if it's from the land that was promised to Avraham Avinu. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell Avraham Avinu? I'm going to give you the land to your children from where? מנהר מצרים עד הנהר הגדול, נהר פרת. את הקיני ואת הכנזי ואת הקדמוני. He promised them a big portion of land. Even if a family goes and conquers that part of land. You have a family, they're warriors, they're strong people, they want to expand their borders. They go and conquer land. אינו נקרא ארץ ישראל כדי שינהגו בו כל המצוות. It's still not considered Eretz Yisrael enough that all of the mitzvot of the land of Israel apply to that place. Some of them, yes, but not all of them. And the Rambam, if you want the details, you can go look here in the laws of Terumot. What about Syria? What about Kedusha Rishona, Kedusha Shniya? ומפני זה חילק יהושע ודינו כל ארץ ישראל לשבטים, ואף על פי שלא נכבשה, כדי שלא תהיה כיבוש יחיד, כשיעלה כל שבט ושבט ויכבוש חלקו. And that's the reason why Yehoshua, remember in the Torah, he gives out the land to the different tribes. He allocates land. Why does he do that? He does that so that when the tribe goes to conquer that land, it's not an individual tribe conquering individual land. It's the Jewish people conquering land that the Bedin already decided is going to go to the Jewish people. And therefore, it's called Kibush Rabim, a conquering of the masses, and therefore that becomes part of Eretz Yisrael. And this gets a little complicated when David HaMelech begins to conquer land. He does it with the permission of the Bedin. He does it as a king, but not all of his land is considered Eretz Yisrael. So Syria, parts of Syria, there are parts of it that have status of Eretz Yisrael and some that don't. You should know the Syrian Jews, they had to deal with this issue when they lived there. But mamash, this is outside of my scope of today's conversation. If you wish to learn these halachot well, look in the laws of Tirumot in the book of Zeraim of the Rambam, and you will see chapter 1 talks all about these halachot. So now back to the Rambam where we are. Yeah. ומותר לשכון בכל העולם כולו חוץ מארץ מצרים. It is permissible for Jews to live everywhere in the world except for the land of Egypt. מן הים הגדול המערבי 400 פרסה ל-400 פרסה כנגד ארץ כוש וכנגד המדבר הכל אסור להתיישב בה. So you have 400 parsa. By 400 parsa, that's about 1,600 kilometers. Assuming that a parsa is 4 kilometers. If you want to understand just how big that is, modern day Egypt is about 1,000 by 1,000 kilometers. So it's really a little more. What is Eretz Kush? Yeah, Eretz Kush. Let's say that it's modern Sudan, which is south to Egypt. Yes? And you have the Midbar. What is the Midbar that's near Egypt? The Sahara Desert, right? So that's the region that Rambam is talking about. Hakol asur nitiyashev ba. It's forbidden for Jews to settle that place. Uvishlosha mekomot hizhira Torah shelo lashuv leMitzrayim. There are 3 separate places where the Torah commands us not to go back to Mitzrayim. The first is by the king. Maybe someone can hand out chumashim. Hand out chumashim. Neftali and Elchanan, you want to hand out chumashim? The blue ones. Give me one first, and then give everybody else. Fast. First to me, Elchanan. Thank you. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Rambam himself, because really, That's where this starts to get complicated, no? Because the Rambam we know lived in. Look on page 1028. If this Chumash, if you want to use your own Chumash, that's Devarim chapter 17, Pasuk 14. When you come to the land that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you, and you inherit it and you dwell in it, and you say, Asima alai melech kechol hagoyim asher sevivotai. I will put for myself a king like all the nations around me. Shom tasim alecha melech asher yivchar Adonai Elohecha bo. You should choose yourself a king that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will choose for you. Mikerev achecha tasim alecha melech. He should be from your brothers, from the Jewish people. You cannot put a non-Jewish king over you who is not your brother. Why would you ever choose a king that's not Jewish to be your king?
Has more money.
Okay, he has money. Why would you choose someone else to be your king?
He's strong, he can fight the war for you.
Okay, in the olden days, you had professional kings. That countries wouldn't. This is a royal family. Even though I'm from another country, I want someone from a royal family to lead me. You can't have that in Am Yisrael. By the way, even if he converts to Am Yisrael, there has to be a certain level of being part of Am Yisrael in order for him to be able to be a king over the Jewish people. Think about how in the United States of America, we're required that the president at least be born in the country in order to be the president. These are security concerns. At the end of the day, if somebody is a person who's not originally part of Am Yisrael, it's not that we don't trust them to be Jewish, but when it comes to being a king and making all of the decisions on behalf of the Jewish people, there's a very particular person we're looking for. It also has to be the kind of person that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses. So these are important rules. Now, he continues, it has to be from Yehuda. Rak lo yarbe lo susim. He cannot have too many horses. That's an interesting mitzvah, not to have too many horses.
Why would you want so many horses?
He can only have enough horses for his chariot. What's the problem with too many horses?
As Hashem said, not to have too many horses, not too many wives, not...
Leaders today that have like 25 Rolls Royces.
There could be a part of this that is humility. It's also a part of this that would lead him to do the next Averah. Listen to the next sentence, where it says, "V'lo yashiv et ha'am Mitzrayma leman harbot sus." You don't want him to take the people back to Egypt so he can have more horses. This is going to make him reliant on the nations in the world that have horses, like Egypt. V'Adonai amar lachem lo tosifu nashuv b'derech hazeh od. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu already warned you not to return back to this place ever again. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Egypt only to tell us, don't do it again. I'm not going to come back and get you from here again. I don't want you living here. Don't come back. So here you find one place in the Torah, it's in the context of the king, that the king should not take the people back to Mitzrayim, because here is the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu already told the Jewish people not to go. Okay, that's place number one. That's where the Rambam tells us here. The Rambam said, wrong Rambam. The Rambam told us, Lo tosifu nashuv b'derech hazeh od. He's quoting that from there. Now if you look in chapter 28, Pasuk 68, so here, this is already in the context of the curses that we have in Parashat Ki Tavo, right? One of the curses is Veheshivcha, I'm not saying you, them. Adonai Mitzrayim ba'oniyot b'derech asher amarti lecha, lo tosif od lirota. One of the curses is on page 1084. Is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will send us back to Egypt on ships. And he told us already, don't go back there. Don't see it again. I don't want to look at Egypt again. והתמכרתם שם לאויביך לעבדים ולשפחות ואין קונה. And they will sell you to your enemies as slaves and servants, and nobody will even care to buy you. אלה דברי הברית. These are the words of the covenant between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meaning, here you have again a warning of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One of the curses is that we will end up in Egypt, the place where He told us never to go see it again. Okay? You now have the third. The third is in the book of Shemot. Okay? And this is in the context of the Egyptians drowning in the sea. That's why we're going back in the Torah. So go to Shemot chapter 14. It's going to be on page 370. One of the Hasidic singers made a song out of this. Vayomer Moshe el ha'am. Moshe tells the Jewish people they're about to, remember here? The Egyptians are chasing us. The Jewish people are complaining to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What do they say? Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael Adonai in Pasuk 10 and now 11. Vayomru el Moshe, they tell Moshe, Hamibli en kevarim b'Mitzrayim lekachtanu lamut b'midbar. Ma zot asita lanu le'otzianu mimitzrayim. What, there were not enough graves in Egypt that you took us out to the desert to kill us over here? Why did you take us out of Egypt? By the way, this is a classic case that any hostage faces. When we free a hostage, usually their first reaction, why did you ruin my life by saving me? They call this in psychology Stockholm Syndrome. It's when the hostage begins to identify with their captor. What kind of Jewish person who's suffering in Egypt for 200 years? Now HaKadosh Baruch Hu frees you through Moshe Rabbenu. And what is your complaint? Why did you take us out of Egypt? You're ruining our life. You want to kill us here? Can you imagine such a thing? This is what the Jewish people think. Look in Eretz Yisrael. The whole day, now we're out of Galut, no? Not us. In Eretz Yisrael, out of Galut. But all day, all we can talk about, Lithuania and Poland and Russia and Morocco and Yemen and Iraq and Iran, as if that's where we come from, and we're stuck now in Eretz Yisrael. Well, it's a sickness. We're from here. We were strangers over there. Now we came back. What are you so obsessed with this conversation for? Harapel always said, what is Sephardim? Sephardim is a nation of Catholics outside of Eretz Yisrael. That's who you're proud to be part of? You're Catholic? No, Chaz v'shalom. So what do you care? Why use the title so proudly? Vayomer Moshe ha'am. So what does Moshe tell the nation? Al tira'u. Don't be afraid. Hityatzevu u'ru'u et yeshuat Adonai asher ya'aseh lechem hayom. Come and see the miracle, the salvation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to make for you today. Ki asher reitem et Mitzrayim hayom lo tosifu lirotam od ad olam. Just the way you see Egypt now, you will never ever see them again like this. It will never happen. The enemies of Am Yisrael, you see them today? Soon, they won't exist. This pasuk here tells us the Rambam is the third pasuk. One, not to go to Eretz Yisrael, and one, not to go to Eretz Mitzrayim. One, not to see Eretz Mitzrayim. The third, not even the Egyptians that you see today, you're never going to see them again. Never go back there. It's none of your business. Let them die. That's a good question. The Rambam adds in one more sentence. Look at the Rambam. Rachel's asking a terrific question. The Rambam says one more sentence. Alexandria bichlal ha'isur. Alexandria is included in the prohibition of Egypt that you're not allowed to go live there. What's so special about Alexandria? Okay, it's near the ocean, right? It's a port city. Goshen, no, it's not. What's special about Alexandria? Where's the name? What's the name Alexandria from?
A Roman city.
It's a city that was built seemingly named after Alexander the Great. Alexander Mogdon of Macedonia. It seems that in the time of the Tanakh Jews, nobody lived in Alexandria. Alexandria was just nothing. And so the Rambam knows that. The Rambam lives in Egypt, so he knows that Alexandria is not part of the historical Egypt. And he tells you, nonetheless, Alexandria is part of this prohibition. Today it exists, and therefore today it's part of Egypt, and today we don't live there. It's something the Rambam would know because he lived there, but we might not know because we didn't. Alexandria is a new city, new in the context of the history of Egypt. Okay, now we're not done yet, because I know that everyone has a burning question about the Rambam himself. Okay, let's wait about that. I'm going to get there. Says the Rambam, מותר לחזור לארץ מצרים לסחורה ולפרק. You say in Hebrew, pragmatia. Yes, what is this word? It's not a Hebrew word. This word comes to us probably from Greek.
Business.
Yeah, pragmatia practically means business matters, which means that likely there really is no difference between the word pragmatia and the word schora. I don't know, at least I don't know of a difference between those two words. Business. You're allowed to go to Egypt to do business. ולכבוש ארצות אחרות. You're allowed to go to Egypt in order to conquer other countries. Let's say Israel decides they want to conquer somewhere in Africa. They're going to have to go through Egypt. Do they have to go around Egypt? No, they can go through Egypt. The only prohibition is to go to Egypt in order to stay there. But if you're just going through there, or you're going to buy something there, or you're going to, that's allowed to do in Egypt. ואין אסור אלא להשתקע שם. The only prohibition is to actually get stuck there, to dwell there in Egypt. ואין לוקין עליו זה. Listen to this carefully. Nonetheless, even though a Jewish person is not allowed to live in Egypt, the Bedin does not beat a person for living in Egypt. Lokin is from the word malkot. We don't beat them, lashes. Why don't we beat them with lashes? Listen carefully. Shebe'et ha'knisa mutarhu. Because why did the person go to Egypt in the first place? To do business, to go buy something, to go look at a property. Who knows what he was doing there? V'im yichashev leshev u'lishtakea en bo maaseh. And now that he's there, he decided, I want to live here. But there's no action that he did. Let me explain the halakha. The halakha says that in order to beat a person in the bedin, there has to be a maaseh. What is a maaseh? Remember, you read in the Yom Kippurim, Lav sheyesh bo maaseh, yesh bo maaseh. We read all of the, I'm doing a prohibition that has an action, doesn't have an action. At the end of the day, the bedin can only give malkot to a person who did an action. Going to Egypt to go do business, were you allowed to do that?
Yes.
Yes. So that action that you took to go to Egypt was allowed. Now you went to Egypt and you really, really like the house you see there, so you decide to stay there. Which action did you do? There was no action. You just didn't go back to Israel. And therefore, there is no way for Bedin to beat you because you didn't do an action at any point that was forbidden. So the Rambam says it's prohibited, but practically the Bedin doesn't give malkot to a person who lives in Egypt. And then the Rambam says the following words. Ve'yera'eli. Someone recently asked me to explain to them why the Rambam says Ve'yera'eli. The Rambam has a letter in his letters to Rabbi Pinchas HaDayan. That's his name. Rabbi Pinchas HaDayan, he explains to him that the words Ve'yera'eli, whenever the Rambam says it appears to me, it's the Rambam saying something that he believes is the halakha, but he has no source for it. So it's a halakha. The Rambam's not making it up. He believes this to be the halakha, but there's nowhere in the Talmud where it says this is the law. So the Rambam says the following: V'yira'eli, it appears to me, she'im kavash melech Yisrael eretz Mitzrayim al pi bedin, that if the king of Israel were to conquer Egypt with the permission of the bedin, shehi muteret, that land is permissible to live in, meaning we can make Mitzrayim part of Eretz Israel. It can happen, as long as we conquer it with the king and the permission of the Bedin. So, but the Torah says never to go there again. So you never go there, or never go there without a Bedin. Says the Rambam, V'lo hizhira Torah, and the only warning the Torah gave us, shelo lashuv layichidim, not to return there as individuals, or lishkon ba v'hi biyad goyim, or to live there while it's in the hands of non-Jews. B'pnei shema'aseh ha'mekulkalin yoter mikol ha'aratzot. Because its actions in Egypt are worse than all the other nations in the world. We know that our rabbis, the Torah, and the whole time Torah warns us, don't do like they did in Mitzrayim. Don't do the Mitzrayim, the people there were very bad people in our history. And therefore, the reason we're not allowed to go to Mitzrayim is not because of the land of Mitzrayim, it's because of the people of Mitzrayim. If the Jews were to conquer Mitzrayim and get rid of the Egyptians from Mitzrayim, then that means that that land would be allowed to live in.
Is there anything about the mark of being slaves there that in the memory of?
It's interesting, and I'm sure that if you're going to go down the road of trying to uncover why the Torah would forbid us to go there, that there's a number of beautiful explanations for why we wouldn't go there. That could be, it's a place that brings us bad memories or whatever else might be. The Rambam seems to believe that the problem is only because of what it says in Vayikra. Look in Vayikra. Okay, Vayikra 18. In Vayikra 18, page 648. 648. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Kadosh Baruch Hu speaks to Moshe saying, Daber el bnei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, v'amarta alehem, and say to them, Ani Adonai Elohechem, I am Hashem your God. Ki ma'aseh eretz Mitzrayim asher yeshavtem ba, lo ta'asu. Don't do the things that you did, that the people of Egypt did when you lived with them. וכמעשה ארץ כנען אשר אני מביא אתכם שמה לא תעשו. And also like the behavior of the people in Canaan, which I'm bringing you to their land, don't do. ובחוקותיהם לא תלכו, and in their laws, do not behave. את משפטי תעשו, follow my laws, ואת חוקותיי תשמעו ללכת בהם, and follow my Torah. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, I am Hashem your God, ושמרתם את חוקותיי ואת משפטי אשר יעשה אותם האדם וחי בהם. Then you shall fulfill my mitzvot, my Torah, and a person will live through those mitzvot. Ani Adonai, I am Hashem your God. It's amazing. The next section of the Torah is a famous Acharei Mot. We read this. It's all about the forbidden sexual relationships. Yeah, very good. And we see here that this is really what the problem in Mitzrayim was. Mitzrayim was shtufei zima, was a place that the sexual promiscuity was off the charts. They were. You see what happens. Even Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu comes. The first thing that happens to Avraham Avinu,
His wife gets killed.
they take his wife. What kind of crazy place is that? Egypt has such a reputation. That's what it is. Look at Yosef HaTzadik and all of it. Nothing. All of his struggles with the wife of Potiphar and all. Everything has to do with the forbidden sexual relationships that exist there. Even if you look in the Rambam, the laws of forbidden sexual relationships, there are particular things that are forbidden because that's the way the people of Mitzrayim used to behave. There's certain things like that. And so according to the Rambam, the reason we can't go to Egypt is because we'll learn from the behavior of the people there. And what if the people there are not there anymore? Then you can live there. Meaning, if Eretz Yisrael extends into Egypt with the permission of the Bedin, conquered by the king, then that becomes part of Eretz Yisrael.
Not under special status, because you can't do all of this part of Israel.
Well, it would be considered now part of Israel, in which case you can do all of those mitzvot in Egypt. Egypt would become part of Israel.
So that the biblical description of Eretz Israel
It's the bare minimum of Eretz Yisrael. It's the bare minimum. We could...
like a province or a territory, it becomes mamash Eretz Israel.
Correct. Like in this country, once upon a time, there was the East Coast. And then it stretched, and then it stretched, and it stretched, and today you even have some states that are not even attached to the mainland. Such a thing could happen, at least according to the Torah. That would all have the status of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, now that we know that, I forgot to bring my edition of Rav Shilat's letters of the Rambam. But I have Rav Kapach, so let me read you what Rav Kapach says. You see, all the commentaries here are really, really bothered how the Rambam could say all of this, but yet where did he live? He lived in Eretz Mitzrayim. And the commentaries jump through all kinds of really fantastic hoops, how the Rambam could live. Yeah. But at the end of the day, he lived in Egypt. At the end of his life, for sure, he didn't leave it. And the question is why? Like, who let the Rambam be there, live there? He himself writes that it was forbidden. I think the Rambam has like 3 graves. The Rambam also has 3 different statues of him. They all look different. The Rambam has like, I think something about the Rambam is very vague. Everyone wants the Rambam to be theirs.
Prophets, a lot of the prophets have millions of graves that was found after there.
Yes. Okay, but the Rambam, you know, we're going to talk about this in a minute. My problem is that I don't remember all of the special. Does anyone have the first volume of Rav Kapach's Mishneh Torah here? The one we use for Kola? I might have it. Yes. Oh, Hashem. Let me just pull up. In there, he has all of the acronyms of rabbis that he uses. They're unique to Rav Kapach, so he doesn't use them anywhere else. He doesn't. It's not standard what other people would use. Here. Okay. He quotes here Rabbi Chaim Abulafia in the book Mikra'e Kodesh, who says the following. How could the Rambam live in Egypt? Here's what Rabbi Chaim Abulafia writes. דמה שדע רבנו במצרים שאחר שעלה סנחריב ובלבל האומות אינם המצרים שאסרה תורה ומותר לדור במצרים. Says Rabbi Chaim Abulafia that ever since Sancheriv came and he relocated all the nations of the world, the people of Egypt today are not the people of Egypt yesterday, and therefore the Rambam was allowed to live in Egypt because it's not the same Egypt. It has to do with the Bilbul HaLeshonot, yes?
The Egyptians today are definitely different.
What?
The modern Egyptians.
They are.
Definitely.
Rav Kapach doesn't like this answer. He doesn't like it, one, because then why would the Rambam tell you that even now you can't live in Egypt? Maybe he didn't know about this whole Sancheriv thing. He did. In the laws of Isurei Biyah, he says what Rachel just said, which is that Ammoni or Moavi, technically, what do we say about them? That they're allowed to join us. Why? Because maybe they're not. The Sancheriv switched around all the nations of the world. Yeah, so meaning the Rambam recognizes that, but he doesn't say that here. Meaning, if that was true, what Rabbi Chaim Abulafia said, that the Rambam lived in Egypt because it wasn't the same Egypt, then the Rambam would have already told you here in the Mishneh Torah, you could live in Egypt. But he didn't tell you that.
Historically, I know nothing about it.
Yeah, sure. Sancheriv, part of his strategy in conquering populations and controlling them seemed to have been to move people from one land to another. He displaced people on purpose. It was in the time of the prophet Chizkiyahu, of Yeshayahu, in the generation of Chizkiyahu, the first temple times. So, a long time ago.
So, to secure their connection to the land. So, as long as you stay in the land, the next generation
Would be strong and fight for it. And
Yosef Tzaddik also moved people in Egypt.
yeah, but that's something else. In the Rambam here, he says that this is a he didn't mention this, which is why it's hard to accept that. And Alexander the Great was before Sancheriv or afterwards? Afterwards. In which case, if the Rambam would accept this idea, then he would have definitely let you live in Alexandria, because that's for sure not the Egypt that was in the times of the Mikah. But Shimon HaTzadik. Yeah, very good. Now there's another idea. The other idea that was given, that maybe the prohibition of going to Egypt only applies if you go from Israel to Egypt. But if you go from other places in Chutz La'aretz to Egypt, it's not a problem. Where did the Rambam come from? The Rambam came from Morocco. So he went from Morocco to Egypt. That wasn't a big deal. It would only be a problem if you came from Eretz Israel. Why does Rav Kapach not like this answer? Very good. Because someone who says that, ve'en devarav nechonim, says the Rambam. But it's not correct. Ki Rabbenu ba min ha'ma'arav le'eretz Yisrael. Because the Rambam left Morocco for Eretz Yisrael. He didn't go to Egypt from Morocco. U'me'eretz Yisrael yarad l'Mitzrayim. And it's from Eretz Yisrael that he goes to Egypt. Kach shedat hare'em eina siba li'yiridat Rabbenu l'Mitzrayim. And therefore it can't be then that this opinion is correct, that the reason why he was able to go to Egypt was because he came from Morocco. He didn't come from Morocco. He came from Israel. And here Rav Kapach says something fascinating. And I think this is the truth. And I think this maybe is relevant to all the Jews who live in Chutz La'aretz, especially to those of us who are rabbis and we are involved in the Jewish community. I think a lot of us feel some resonance with the Rambam here. Listen to what Rav Kapach says. V'nira nachon, what appears to me to be correct. Ki be'oto zman hayta Eretz Yisrael chareva. That at that time Eretz Yisrael was really a barren wasteland. I mean, not much was going on in Eretz Yisrael. ואף על פי שידע רבנו את מצבה, עלה אליה. Even though Rabbenu HaRambam knew that the situation in Israel was not so great, he still wanted to live in Israel. And that's why he made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. וירד בנמל עכו כידוע. And we know that the Rambam, he reached the port of Akko, Acre. He was there, and that's where he came to Eretz Yisrael. אך בהיותו בארץ ישראל, but when he was living already in Eretz Yisrael, הגיעו אליו שמועות נכונות על מצב היהודים והיהדות במצרים. He received correct information, news of what was going on to the Jews and Judaism in Egypt. What was happening in Egypt at the time? Yeah, very good. על השתלטות הקראים על היהודים. The overtaking of the Jewish community by the Karaites. על גופם ודעתם V'mocham, says the Rambam, they overtook our bodies, our minds, our thoughts and our minds. Meaning, the Karaim really had a stronghold on the Jewish community in Egypt. Gam nesiam v'rov Yisrael, or Rabbim Yisrael, nahagu minahag Karaim. And a majority of the Jews in Egypt, or at least a large number of Jews in Egypt, had already begun following the practices of the Karaim. Who are the Karaim? Right? So they are Jews, biologically Jews, who believe in the written Torah, but not in the oral Torah. For those of you in the Sunday class, you remember we saw their mezuzot. It's not the Samaritans who have the mezuzah on top of the door. It's the ones who put the 10 Commandments on the door. Like where we put our mezuzah, but they put the 10 Commandments. Those are the Karaim. The Karaim are biologically Jews. Their ideology is not that of our Chachamim, so they're not Pharisees, they're not Perushim. They're also not Tzdokim. So the Sadducees of the Second Temple times, they're similar in some ways to Karaim, but Karaim are their own group. The word Karaim comes from Mikra. They're the people of the Bible. They believe in what's written in the Torah. They had a famous Chacham, he was named Anan, that was the founder of the Karaim. I have in my United Kingdom class, I have a shiur on the history. Very good. And then it was fighting who was going to be politically the head of the community, and obviously the Karaite history and the rabbinic history of the Karaim don't always match up with each other. But push comes to shove. In Egypt, the Karaim were a very strong force of Judaism. How bad was it? Gam nisiam haya Karaim. Even the prince, the leader of the Jewish people in Egypt, was a Karaim. לפיכך נסע רבנו קל וחומר. Yeah, sure. The Karaim are a functional Jewish community. Yeah. What do you mean? I think it's a mistake when we think Karaim don't have an oral Torah. The Karaim do have oral traditions. They simply don't accept our oral traditions as binding on them. And there were different, I'm afraid sometimes because people don't always understand nuance when it comes to Torah.
Rabbi, they do Mizbeach and Korban, which were not allowed.
No, don't confuse Karaim with Shomonim. Yeah?
Those Karaim, they do Mizbeach.
So you have, I think it's important when we talk about Karaim. One is Karaim exist. Yes, they exist. They're real. They're not some people that disappeared into history. They exist. They're not that many of them, let's say, compared to the rest of us, but they exist. Two, they're a very old Jewish community. So not to take them lightly, they have their books, and they have writings, and they have rabbis, and they have commentaries and Torah, and I have a section of my library that is Karaite literature. Karaim believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They believe in Sachar v'Onesh, and reward and consequence. Karaim believe in the Mashiach. Karaim believe in the divinity of the Torah. They believe in Moshe Rabbenu. They believe in many, many, many things that, in my opinion, make them far superior to other Jews that we are so happy. Please mute yourself. That we are so happy to include in the Jewish community. The Karaim have a lot of good things in them. Happens to be that about the oral Torah we don't agree at all, and there were better times in our history where our relationships with them were better. There were worse times in our history where our relationships with them were very, very bad. Very bad. Not good, very bad. There were certain Chachamim that tried to bring the Karaim close, certain Chachamim that tried to fight the Karaim. Everybody and their relationship with the Karaim, I, for the life of me, don't understand why we are so willing to work together with so many Jewish groups in the world that don't believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they don't believe in Torah Sinai, they don't believe in the Mashiach, they don't believe in Eretz Yisrael, they don't believe all kinds of things they don't believe. No, they speak Arabic mostly. The ones, who are you thinking of?
I think it was the, let me see.
Yeah, something else. Yeah, the Karaim, there's a lot that we share in common. I'm not telling you now that we're going to give up our rabbinic tradition for the Karaim, but it would be wise for us to know a little bit more about who they are and what they are, and have some kind of working relationship. There was an Ashkenazi Chacham. His name was Rabbi Nachman Krochmal. Remember that name because he was cancelled. Rabbi Nachman Krochmal was a very special Ashkenazi rabbi who was a very big intellectual. He was a rabbi in Odessa. Odessa is like the cultural capital of Russia at the time. And his students, in his Bet Midrash, he brought in the Maskilim, those people that were starting the early reform movement. They came to learn Torah with him. He managed to bring Karaim to learn Torah with him. He had all kinds of people learning Torah with him. Unfortunately, the ultra-Orthodox community made his life hell. You want to Google a picture? Look up Nachman Krochmal. I want you to see a picture of him. If you have an iPad, maybe you could show us. Krochmal is K-R, no problem. Nachman Krochmal, K-R-O-C-H-M-A-L, or M-O-L, I don't know how they spell it. Yeah, this one. Yeah. You found him? Show the class, I'll show here. This is the reform rabbi that everyone is talking about. Mamash, he was not. I have his writings in my house. Harav Uziel. Look at images, for sure there's a picture. No. Rachel will show you a picture. Rabbi Nachman Krochmal, Harav Uziel studied his writings. He references his writings. But he got in big trouble for Mamash trying to bring the Karaim close to the rest of Am Yisrael. Yes, so he wrote a new Moreh Nevuchim, a new guide of the perplexed, Rabbi Krochmal. I have it at home. Unfortunately, because he was cancelled by the halachically observant community of Eastern Europe, so other denominations grabbed him up as their own rabbi in terms of history. Let me finish Rav Kapach. He says the following.
Why they cancel him?
Because he was too open-minded. Like everybody who tried to do something good for the Jewish people. He was very special to Micham, very special. לפיכך נעשה רבנו קל וחומר. The Rambam, he did a kal v'chomer. What is a kal v'chomer? Let's read one more halakha on the Rambam, and I'll tell you the kal v'chomer. We'll end with this teaching. I just want to read to you so you know what he's talking about. Look in the Rambam, the 9th halakha. Asur la'tzet me'eretz Yisrael lechutz la'aretz le'olam. It's forbidden to leave Eretz Yisrael to outside of Israel forever. Ela, the only reason you can leave Eretz Yisrael, lilmod Torah, to learn Torah, or lisa isha, or to get married, or lahatzil miyad hagoyim, or to save your money, property, maybe even people's lives from the hands of goyim. V'yachazor la'aretz, and then you come back to Eretz Yisrael. You don't go to outside of Israel to get married and stay there. You go outside of Israel, you find a wife, you come back to Israel. V'chen yotzehu lischora, and you're allowed to go outside of Eretz Yisrael for business. Aval lishkon bechutz ha'aretz asur. But to live outside of Eretz Yisrael for good, it's forbidden. אלא אם כן חזק הרעב שם, עד שנעשה שווה דינר חיטין בשני דינרים. The only time you could leave is if it's so much famine in Israel that the cost of living doubles. That's how bad it becomes. במה דברים אמורים? What does this refer to? בשהיו המעות מצויות והפירות ביוקר. When there was money, but everything is expensive. Yes? I mean, you have money, but the food now costs double. By the way, America is not doing so great. We're paying a lot of money for the food that you eat now. I was at Costco recently and I noticed that everything before COVID that used to be $10 is now $14 or $15. Everything. Everything that used to be $8 is $12. Everything went up. Everything. And I'm sure that's like that in other stores. I'm not the one who shops so much, but I'm sure that everything in the world went up like that. אבל אם היו הפירות בזול, but if the food is cheap, ולא ימצא מעות, ולא במי יסתכר, ועבדה פירותם מן הכיס, יצא לכל מקום שימצא בו רווח. But if life is affordable, but what's the problem? The problem is you don't have parnasah. You can't find a job. You can't find anything to buy food with. So if you have money, but the cost of living is too high, you can go outside of Israel. If the cost of living is normal, but you can't afford to live there, mamash, you have no food to eat, then you can also live anywhere where you can afford food. What's the point of moving to America if you're going to be poor in America? You might as well be poor in Israel. I mean, you don't leave Eretz Yisrael to go be poor somewhere else. Only if it's, wow, there I can live, I can eat food, I can take care of my kids, I can take care of my family, but if that doesn't help, stay in Israel. And even though it's permissible in certain instances to leave Eretz Yisrael, it's not the righteous thing to do. Sharei Machlon v'Chilion, Shnei Gedolei Hador hayu. Who were Machlon v'Chilion? They were the sons of Naomi, married to Ruth and Orpah. Very good. Remember Megillat Ruth? They were Gedolei Hador. They were the leaders of the Jewish people. Umipnei tzara gedola yatzu, and they left Israel because of a terrible famine that was there. They couldn't afford to live there. Look, and I'm putting the Midrashim aside. That's what it says in Megillat Ruth. Look at the beginning of Megillat Ruth. What happens? V'nitchayvu kelaya lamakom, and they were deserving of the death penalty by Kadosh Baruch Hu. They die. Why do they die? Because they left Eretz Yisrael. Hari, their name Machlon v'Chilion. It's not their real names. You know, in Megillat Ruth, almost nobody has a real name. Naomi, it's not a real name. Boaz, not a real name. Ruth, okay, maybe Ruth is a real name. Orpah, that's not a real name. The Ploni Almoni, that's not even a name. It means John Doe. It's not even a name. All of the names of Megillat Ruth are not names. They tell you something about the person. Machlon v'Chilion is from the words of to be destroyed. They were deserving to be destroyed because they left Eretz Yisrael, even though they were allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. But they should not have left Eretz Yisrael. They were the leaders of the Jewish people. They can't abandon the ship. If they leave, everybody leaves. And so here's now what the Rambam says. Listen what the Rav Kapach says. I'm going to read you now that you know this halakha. Listen to what the Rav Kapach says. And I think this is the truth. Nasa Rabbenu kal v'chomer. Rabbenu HaRambam, he did the following calculation. Uma lilmod Torah mutar. Just like you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael to study Torah, that's okay. By the way, there's no one to teach you Torah in Eretz Yisrael? It couldn't be that there will be a Jewish people, that there's no Torah in Eretz Yisrael? Could it be? Never. I don't think there ever was a period in our history where there were no rabbis in Eretz Yisrael. But Look in the Rambam, the laws of mourning.
Want to have your own birthday.
The laws of mourning, chapter 3. There the Rambam says, but maybe the rabbi that you're looking for is not in Eretz Israel. It could be. Imagine you lived in Eretz Israel, but the Rambam is in Egypt. So who are you going to learn Torah from during the Rambam's generation? If not the Rambam. Imagine this is when Maran is living outside of Israel. Imagine you're Ashkenazi and Rashi is living in France. So for sure you could study Torah from someone in Eretz Israel. But let's say the person you want to study Torah from lives outside of Eretz Israel. Then that would be the situation where you would leave to study Torah and then come back.
Then why is it the one you want to learn from, not the
Oh, that's a great question. So listen to what the Rambam is saying about himself. The Rambam says, "Uma lilmod Torah mutar." If you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael to learn Torah, כל שכן הקים עולה של תורה ולהחזיר את היהודים ליהדותם, how much more so you could leave Israel not to study Torah, but to save the Torah, to save the Jews outside of Israel in Egypt from becoming Karaim. The Rambam went down to Egypt to fight a war. It was a war against the Karaim. ופעולותיו שם והתקנות שעשה יוכיחו את כוונתו תחילה. And look at the Rambam. You ever read the Rambam's letters when he lived in Egypt? War is not a word. He waged war against the Karaim. It was a chok v'lo ya'avor. He was there, fought about mikvaot, he fought about all kinds of things he fought over there. And the Rambam was successful. That's why the Rambam went to Egypt. וכנראה לא ירד להשתקע. It seems, says Rav Kapach, that the Rambam didn't go there in order to stay there. The Rambam would have never left Eretz Yisrael to go live in Egypt. But what happened? ראה כי אי אפשר לעזוב. He saw that he can't leave. כיוון ששאריות הקראים עדיין מלחשים. Because the Karaites were still there. They were still fighting. The leftovers that he didn't win, they were still fighting. לפיכך ישב, so he stayed in Egypt, עד יערה רוח ממרום, until HaKadosh Baruch Hu would send some divine spirit and take him back there. It means some inspiration to go back to Eretz Yisrael. ובינתיים נטרפה השעה. And in the interim, what happened? The world got crazy. Sometimes you wanted to go home, but the world fell apart. And you wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael, but the roads were closed, or things happened, or whatever it was. I remember here during COVID, my scariest time in my life was when the airports were closed. A Jew always has a plan. Where do you run away? How do you leave? Where do you go? Where something goes bad here, how do you get home to Israel? All of a sudden, Israel's closed. Airports are closed. Even if they're open, they're only open to Israeli citizens who had a vaccine, who had a card, who had a this, you remember those days? At that point in time, I felt stuck. I mean, if something goes wrong, where do you run to? The Rambam goes to Egypt, not to stay there. He goes there to fight a war to save the Egyptian Jewish community. He does. The Rambam thinks to him, we have Jews in Egypt. But what happens? He got stuck. He got stuck. He didn't intend to live there. There's no way in the world that the Rambam would have violated these halachot here and gone to live in Egypt intentionally. He went there beheter. He went there with the permission of halakha. There's a Talmid Chacham to save the Jewish community there. And he was staying there. Why did he stay there? Because he wasn't done fighting this war yet. And then by the time he tried to get out, he couldn't get out. This could happen to anybody. In my opinion, this is the truth about why the Rambam stayed in Egypt. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't something that he planned to do. It wasn't a violation of halakha. It was within the boundaries of halakha. And who knows better than the Rambam what the reasons for why a Jewish person is allowed to live outside of Eretz Israel. There for sure were Batei Din and communities, maybe very small ones, usually surrounding Yerushalayim and the north, somewhere around the Galil region or wherever else. The rest of Israel, you'd have to look. I don't know exactly in the Rambam's generation how everything was. You find that there are many travelers in that time through Israel, so we have a lot of documentation. Yeah, of course. So very good. And it's not the only one, but one of them. I'm sure that if we wanted to, we could look up exactly who were the other rabbis, who were the other Batei Din there at that time. And I think for now I'm going to stop here. We have one more section on Eretz Yisrael to do, God willing, next week when we get back together. I hope to have called on Monday and Tuesday next week. But I want you to have this in mind, and that is to look at these halachot and to recognize Jewish people belong in Eretz Yisrael. Fish belong in the ocean, birds belong in the sky. If we're living in a cage in my living room, it's only because it's not a natural thing for an animal to live like that. It's not natural for Jews in Chutz Haaretz. If you're here, there better be a really good reason why you're here. What are you doing here? What are you busy? You're busy learning Torah? Great. You're busy teaching Torah? Great. You're busy saving the Jews around you? If you're just living here because you like your house and you like your car and you like the lifestyle and you want to think maybe I'm going to buy another property, all of that is not a reason why Jews live outside of Israel. We don't live here because of that. We live here because we have a mission, and as soon as that mission is over, we're ready to go. And the test, what is the test? If I would tell you, listen, the mission is done, are you ready to go? Well, my swimming pool, I just put new plaster inside of it. That's the answer? Then you were lying to yourself the whole time. This is something we have to think about. B'ezrat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take us home very, very soon.